My name is Melissa. I work here at Prevalent Business Development, and we are joined today by a very special guest or guests, Jeff Kramer from Ford Motor Company. I'm sure you've heard of it. So he is the head of third-party cyber risk management. Welcome, Jeff. And
Thank you.
we also do have Mike Yaffe joining us, and he is our Chief Marketing Officer here. Hello, Mike.
Oh, hey.
I'll figure that one out soon. And then last but not least, one of my favorite people here on this call, specifically Scott Lang. He's with us today. Scott is our VP of Product Marketing, and he will dive into maybe a little bit about how Prevalent might be able to help you. A little bit of housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded. You will get the slideshow afterwards, so don't worry. You don't have to take notes or anything. And yeah, you're all muted. So if you have any questions, just throw them in the Q&A and we'll try to chip away at those as we see fit. And without further ado, I will pass things over to Jeff. Go ahead.
All right, thank you very much, Melissa. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to what is a increasingly larger crowd here. So I've been with Ford now for 34 years and been doing this doing third-party risk management at Ford for the past 4 years or so, and it's quite a growing field and quite important. So I'm glad to share some of what we're doing here at Ford. Look forward to some of the questions. So I don't know if Melissa, if you could change the next slide. So I always like to come up with some introductory. Again, my name is Jeff Kramer, work for the Ford Motor Company. Graduated with a couple degrees in computer science from Central Michigan University in 1984 and Wayne State University in Detroit with a master's in computer science in 1991. I do live in the Detroit area. Suburban Detroit, and just things about me. Been married for 38 years now, have 3 adult children, and I will say throughout most of my life I've been annoyed by people that provide pictures of their grandchildren all the time, and that stopped when I actually became a grandfather.
So you're that guy now, right? You're that guy.
I am exactly that guy now, and so I have two granddaughters, 2 adorable granddaughters. You see their picture there. The 1-year-old, that's about as close as we can get to getting her to sit still for a picture. And her 5-year-old sister's a little bit annoyed by that. Thought that was a pretty nice picture from our 4th of July gathering. A little more about myself. I'm a sports enthusiast, which living in the Detroit area for the last 10 years or so has been challenging. But we do have some opportunity here that we've never had before. Our NFL team has never been to the Super Bowl ever. It's been around for 60 years and we've never been there. Not even really close, but they're getting better, and this is going to be the year. So you've heard it here first if that happens. And then hell might freeze over at that point too, but we'll see. As far as professional experience, coming out of college, I spent 4 years at the National Security Agency in Fort Meade, Maryland. Got a lot of really good experience there. But we wanted to come back to Southeastern Michigan and start a family. So ended up getting the job as an agency employee at Ford Motor Company, doing a little bit of programming for the transmission division. And about a year later, they hired me in. So started at Ford in 1989, been doing several different roles over the years, from setting up token ring networks to setting up our first IBM PS2 Model 80s, working with Windows 3.1, all those really old types of things, all the way through, and did a lot of PC support, did a lot of Unix support. And then sometime in the late 90s, I started working with Oracle databases, and I led a team of Oracle database administrators, and part of that was making sure that everything was secure with our databases. So I got a lot of exposure to what's needed to make sure that what your infrastructure is doing is secure. when about 5 years, no, more than that, 8 years ago now, I decided that I was getting tired of doing 24/7 support, being on call. I wasn't always on call, but being the supervisor, you're the first person the on-call person calls. So I was getting a little bit tired of that, and I ended up moving into cybersecurity, so out of an operations role, and did some work with some of our plants for their cybersecurity needs. But then about 4 years ago, we had an issue with one of our suppliers at our plants where we built the F-150s. Now, if you know anything about Ford, you'll know that the F-150 is our moneymaker. When that shuts down, when that line shuts down, it gets the attention of a lot of people, and we had a line shut down for a couple of shifts because of a ransomware attack of one of our suppliers directly. So one of the things that they wanted to do, they came to our CISO and said, we need to incorporate uh, uh, cyber risk into our supplier risk management processes. Purchasing, our purchasing organization, our supply chain organization, does a really good job of addressing supplier risk, and has always done that for things like financial, sustainability. Are they mining materials correctly? All these types of things. But cyber risk was never a part of it. So our management tasked me to start leading the team to provide some of that risk information to our suppliers. Um, so um, so that's uh, so that's why we are where we are today. I have a team of 7 people, and we go out and we do assessments. A lot of them are on the line today, giving me great support, and so I'll just wanted to talk a little bit about what it is we do. How we prioritize our suppliers, what kind of levels of assessments we send out, how we deal with suppliers that we see as problematic, and just some questions that we had about some of our challenges and some of these other things that we wanted to share with you today. So if Melissa, you can go to the next slide. So what we decided that we wanted to do is that we wanted to send some assessments out to our suppliers. But one of the things about Ford is that we have, and this number fluctuates on a daily basis, we have roughly 14,000 suppliers. Very daunting task to go out and assess all of them. And in fact, we've never done that. What we've done is now we prioritize, and we continue to prioritize which suppliers we send assessments to. And that's based upon some of the risks. And some of the things that we look at we have purchasing applications that provide uh, some indication of the types of services that each of the purchase orders that go out provide. And we're able to take a look at that, and we make some determinations based upon this code we call a commodity code, as to what services are provided. And we identify some of the ones that we're most interested in. And I mean, some of the ones that we're most interested, like engineering suppliers, the suppliers that do transportation for us, some of our marketing suppliers spend a lot of money on marketing, and like companies that do consulting. So those are some of the suppliers that we do put up on kind of a higher level. Suppliers that manage Ford's data and IT services for us. One such example of that would be Prevalent. It's a SaaS offering, and they manage this data that is Ford's data. They do that for us. So we have many suppliers that do that. Prevalent is not a, they don't hold a lot of any of our secret information, but we do have suppliers that do. Healthcare, employee benefits, some that have a lot that have some customer data, some personalized information. So those are also suppliers that we do prioritize. And then also I mentioned that there were suppliers that do that have the ability to, if they shut down their operations, it would have a negative impact upon Ford's operations. And so our production, if we don't have transmissions or wiring our seats to put inside of vehicles, that's a problem. And a lot of our suppliers have a lot of our plants have very distinct plans and for sequencing as the cars go by. They're building for an order, so it has to have this kind of seat that's going into the vehicle, or this kind of engine, or anything. And if it's not there, it shuts down the plant. So with the help of our supply chain organization, we've identified those particular suppliers. The assessment that we chose is an industry standard called the SIG Light. And I'm just going to check to make sure that I'm still being heard.
Yep, we hear you loud and clear, Jeff.
Okay,
just had a little snafu with the slide there. We're getting it back online.
Okay, yeah, no problem. I just I didn't know if I have had issues at times with my own internet provider, so I am in my home today. So I'll just keep going, and I think Melissa will catch up. And I think it's back a couple, or back one. Yes. So so the assessment that we chose is the SIG Light, what we consider to be an industry standard assessment. And even over the years when we first started, I think there were, the full SIG Light had about, over 250 to 300 questions, depending on, what you're answering. And over the years, now we're in, 2023, they've really condensed that, made it a little less cumbersome, but still provide the information that we need in order to provide the risk information to our purchasing partners. So, but what we found was that some of the questions even didn't pertain to some of our suppliers. For instance, there were a lot of questions within the SIG Light that says, well, how do you handle scoped data? Scoped data being the data that Ford is providing to you for you to manage. And a lot of our production suppliers that provide us with those seats, those wiring harnesses, they don't manage our scope data, and they don't even know what scope data is. So they were answering some questions that what we determined wasn't really appropriate to even ask them. It doesn't provide any more information. It's just it just causes churn and confusion in the whole system. So so what we decided to do was to come up with even 4 levels of the SIG Light. The full, if it's one of these one of the services, one of the suppliers that provide IT services, they get the full SIG Light. For the production suppliers that do have the potential to shut down Ford operations, they get really the full SIG Light also, but all the questions about scope data are taken out because they don't really pertain to them. And then we have a couple of other levels. The fourth level, third level, basically is a little bit less detail. Kind of doesn't go as far into the SIG Light, and those are, it really is almost like a catch-all on that third level. We have a minimum level also, and that really is just does this supplier provide just the rudimentary things that we would expect any company to do. We don't really use that because we're prioritizing our riskiest suppliers. We only use it now with some of our pre-sourcing pre-sourcing processes where if a buyer would like to see some of this information, we'll send them the 20 question minimum, and they'll get that information.
Hey, Jeff, can I interject around profile and
Sure.
tiering? It just, look, I feel like a lot of the folks that we talk to that have either done something and failed or they're doing spreadsheets, that seems to be the biggest challenge, right? And I'd just love your opinion on this. Nobody's saying when you do third party, you kind of, you do the whole universe at once, right? You have to understand who's most important, and you're asking people different sets of questions. And the frequency, the type, and how you go after somebody who provides something to, the F-150 versus something that's, marginally impactful to your org is very different, right? And look, most people start with just trying to figure out how do you do this effectively within a certain tier before expanding globally. I just, how important was tiering to you?
Well, very important, and as it went on, we realized how much more important it was, right? So, originally we're just sending out assessment, the same full assessment to everyone, and again, the questions just did not pertain to everyone. So we tried to make sure that it pertains to everyone. But how we set that up, it's still challenging. I'll say that, Mike. With regard to the number of suppliers that we have, and we're getting a lot of information from a lot of disparate systems that, and it's not really all tied together. There's a lot of activity around doing that. We're not there yet, and I know when talking to some of our colleagues, that's a fairly common issue amongst companies of our size for sure, but even smaller companies that have a lot of the same issues. We're trying, not there yet, but it'll be there someday.
And that's okay. That's the way it is, right? You got to put a stake in the ground. The term I continue to use with this is muscle memory, right? It's not necessarily a built-in capability within an organization, and you kind of have to teach. You're not only teaching yourself and your team, but you're teaching the organization how to consume, deal with, and
exactly.
as it goes. Sorry, didn't mean, but I thought it was a little bit.
By all means, if there are questions that, even if you see them in the chat, if it's particularly important or something I'm talking about, please feel free to jump in. Gives me a chance to
take a little water break, catch your breath, collect your thoughts a little bit. I also did want to ask Melissa why you and I were neither of her favorite people, but we can save that for another time.
I will address that at the end of this webinar.
Okay. Well, I just met Melissa, so I'm hoping I'm getting up there. So just the last thing on here, we have expectations of our suppliers for sure. One is that when we send them this assessment, that they complete it, and they complete it truthfully, right? Quite honestly, this is a self-assessment. Given the number of people that we have and the number of suppliers that we have, we can't go out and review evidence. If someone says they have a business continuity plan, we can't review all of those. So this is a self-assessment, and what we expect is that the supplier will complete it with integrity. Certainly, we have within our terms and conditions, we do have a clause that says that you will complete this assessment, complete the various assessments on a regular basis. And essentially we give them with a month to complete it. Certainly if people need more time, we do it. And then they'll come in and they'll get some reviews. And I think I just saw a little snippet at the bottom from the chat that perhaps we asking about certifications, and just mentioning here that it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to send an assessment out to a team and then they come back and say, well, we have this this ISO 27001 certification. We went through the time and effort and money to do this. Why are you sending us this assessment? Why should we complete this assessment? And essentially we say, well, that's a good point. There's really no reason. If someone independent has reviewed your assessment, reviewed your cybersecurity posture, we will take that in lieu of your completing this assessment. It saves us time and it saves them time for sure. And there's things like, and we mentioned that it's reviewed. We do accept SOC 2 Type 2 reports, and potentially there could be exceptions within that report, and we do review that for exceptions and do manually create risks within the system and ask them to address those. Okay, next slide, please, Melissa. So when the assessments, are sent out within a set period of time, they get completed by the supplier, and they get submitted. It goes to the prevalent risk operations center first, and they review it, fairly quickly for completion. I mean, we ask for things like whether or not any of the replies that come back is not applicable. If there's comments around it to tell us why it's not applicable, that's something that we ask for. So they do a quick search through the assessment as it's submitted. If there's concerns, they'll pop it back to the supplier. If not, they put it in the queue for my team to take a look at and to review. And what we do is a few things. First of all, if there are comments or notes within some of the answers, and I will say that in the SIG Lite, I mean, if you're not familiar, essentially it's and it's probably true with everyone. It's basically we're asking yes, no, right? Yes, no, not applicable. Generally, one of the yes, nos is a risk response. And when that risk response is completed, it generates a risk record. And sometimes suppliers will put in notes that say, okay, here's a compensating control. We don't have this, but we do have a compensating control for this, and they designate that. And then we review those, and I mean, if it's suitable, we'll mark that risk as remediated. But generally, there's not a lot of that. It mostly comes back as yes, no. And within the SIG Lite, what we found was a couple different types of questions, and these are kind of our own terms, so it may not make a lot of sense. One is an informational question, and I mean, essentially that is, does a situation exist where a risk may occur, right? So things like, do you use servers internally on your data center do you use Unix servers at all within your data center? And so if that's the case, or if you have some kind of a DMZ where if there's data shared externally, does a DMZ exist? And things like that, if they answer yes, well, a risk record gets generated. But there may be policies, procedures, standards in place that would mitigate that risk. And that's what we're calling here is the policy questions. And those are just exactly what I mentioned. Do you have this policy in place? Do you have this procedure? Do you have a standard or some process that would help mitigate the potential risks as I was just saying? I mean, these are things like, do you do access reviews? Do you have physical security in your facility so that visitors have to sign in, or is the doors just wide open? So a lot of cases, these informational questions that generate risks will get mitigated based upon the policy questions that are associated with them. And we review that on a yearly basis as to, okay, these informational questions would generate a risk. What do we think would be a compensating control, the controls that would help mitigate that risk?
Hey, Jeff, I came from, I've worked in information security. I'm a marketing guy, so that means I don't really know what I'm talking about, but enough to be kind of dangerous. But look, I go all the way back to penetration testing and in creating kind of exploit toolkits so people wouldn't spend 40 hours writing Python code and then they could actually run it. The reviews and the collecting, I think, is where a lot of people get stuck with third-party risk, right? It seems daunting because of the manual labor. Look, I completely advocate the hybrid approach or some type of thing where you and your team are reviewing results. I think, sorry, and I could be off, but I just think it's a waste of time for you guys to be out there trying to get people to say, can you please answer question 38 and da-da-da-da-da. You guys are too smart for that. I mean,
right.
How do you integrate that type of thing? What's your vibe on where do you come down on that?
Well, so we, as far as like answering individual questions or getting the assessments done, we do rely on Prevalent to do that with a lot of the automation for, if there's 2 weeks left, we send them an email. If there's a week left before the due date, or if the due date is the next day, or if you haven't started within a couple weeks, an email gets sent out to the contact. So we don't do a lot of that, but we do rely on our purchasing partners that have people and actually own the relationship with these suppliers, and they do have some say in how these, well, they have a lot of say, but they do a lot of the cajoling also to get some of these things done. So we try not to get too involved in that because that's not really that doesn't really leverage the strength of our team. And we like to make sure that we're doing things like reviewing the assessments as they come in. And then also I'll talk a little bit about how we engage with the suppliers if we deem them to be problematic. But did that answer your question, Mike?
Yeah, it did. I just I have a big thing that there's, however you get there, it doesn't matter. Quite honestly, it's sausage making. Your guys have bigger problems to fry than getting people to answer questions. You guys should be reviewing results and making risk-based decisions and who to fix and tell what people to do so the business stays on track, not spending a ridiculous amount of time with silly tasks, quite frankly.
Yeah, no, understand. So, and I'll just, I'll go quickly through this. So just there's a risk level determined, the number of total risk records, number of critical risks. And again, we do some adjusting with regard to what's a critical risk and what isn't based upon some feedback that we get from our purchasing partners or any of our colleagues within cybersecurity or just our own experience. So we do that, and then just the number of risks determine whether it's a red, yellow, green status, and if it's a red status, then we do some engagement with the supplier, and I think that's the next slide, Melissa.
Before we do hop to that next one, 2 questions came in that were asking the same thing. People are curious, how large of a team do you have working on third-party risk management?
And I would actually add, I saw those, Jeff. Can you give kind of a view of what people's responsibility are? Because my guess is you're kind of at the top end, right, of having support in terms of manpower. So kind of identifying what each person does or group does would be awesome without obviously getting too.
Yeah, so and quite honestly, like all of our team does a lot of these types of reviews for sure. But there's a lot of different types of activities where I've given sub teams or individuals the responsibility of coming up with different solutions. I mean, we have people looking at every year the SIG light changes, and we have people looking at that. We have people looking at just the process that we use, how they can we make it more efficient? Just the process of even identifying. We have people within purchasing and systems that identify who our contacts are at the suppliers, but we have to take a look and just ensure that we're sending to the right people, and then when we do a campaign, we have quite a few people that that are involved in going through that. Overall, my team is 7 people besides myself, and you're right, I'm up there. I try not to screw things up by doing any of the actual work, but they do a great job, and we meet often on some of these subtasks. So does that work for you, Mike?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right, and I think I answered the questions from Melissa, from the team, from the participants. So yeah, okay, red status meetings. So so if we determine someone's a red status supplier, so what we do is we ask purchasing to create a meeting, and a lot of times we have the purchasing or purchasing liaison in that meeting. There are times where we have like the buyer that is from within purchasing, who is who works the most and owns that relationship with that supplier. And then it's from the supplier end, we ask for people that are that completed the assessment, and anyone else that's appropriate. During the initial meeting, we review the risk, focusing mostly on the critical risks, and we're asking them to make a commitment to completing this and going back and making coming up with some kind of a timeline as to when they may remediate these risks. We know that for a lot of the suppliers, it's not an easy task. It's not something that can be done in a month, in 2 months, in 6 months sometimes. But what we ask for is progress to continue to be made, and we ask for communication to kind of go back and forth from within the prevalent platform. It does a real good job of communicating, of facilitating that communication from within the platform, and we capture our communication, and we have it available for anyone who needs to take a look at it, so that's our main method of communication between us and the suppliers. And then after that meeting, we do have a follow-up meeting where we're asking them to put into the comments what their timeline is for the remediation. And we review those at that follow-up meeting and really answer any questions as they dig deeper into what they need to do. If they have any questions, we do that. We answer those during that follow-up meeting. But we try to stay engaged throughout until this remediation happens and the supplier moves out of red status and they clear out their critical risks. And we do that by, again, dumping comments within the risk records kind of on a monthly basis afterwards to see what they've been doing. If they want to have another meeting, we'll do that too. But generally, after the first couple meetings, we handle it through email and or mostly through the platform. We've had some fairly good success in doing this, and in a lot of ways, I see that as where we add as much value as anything else. So we've had over 100 suppliers. We've met with over 250 of our suppliers over the last year or so, and we've had about 120 of them that moved from a red status into something more compliant, and that's where we, like I said, I think that's where we add value. We know that it's a small subset of our suppliers for sure, but it is raising the level for everyone, in my opinion.
Hey, Jeff, we've gotten
Yeah.
3 questions, and I think we're going to get to our kind of Q&A segment where I ask you questions, but we're happy to take audience questions too.
Mm-hmm.
First one deals with the tiering a little bit from what we talked about. I'll just read it. Many procurement teams use a tiering approach, right, to segment the company's vendors. How do you tackle the issue where business stakeholders feel that the lower tier vendors are not as critical from a cyber perspective than a higher tier? My guess is, they don't want their folks in a top tier vendor and where they're getting overly scrutinized.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's like classic examples sometimes that you try to cite with like HVAC companies that had some issues that where hackers got into a
Yeah, I'll say that's the
target. Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's the target thing. So
yeah.
So that certainly is the is kind of the main example that we use, but again, it's explaining that the threats are everywhere. The threats are against everyone. It's not always about even the hackers coming in through a supplier. A lot of times it's not that they don't even have a connection, but we need to make sure that that's the case. One of the questions that we've augmented that we've added to the SIG-Lite, or one addendum we made to a question was, do you have a disaster recovery plan, and does it involve coming to our CERT team, our incident response team, with an email? Do you have that in your plan? And that's just a way that we know that they're that our interests are there for that. So we need to check that for all suppliers, and really, and then there are other suppliers that would have a negative impact on our business or our manufacturing facilities, and you just and a lot of times you just don't know where the threats are coming and what the impact might be. So
yeah. Let's see. We got a question from Janet and an anonymous attendee. It deals with the same one. How do you capture evidence of risk mitigation, and I'll take this one a step further. How are you able to enforce mitigation? I always find that TPRM programs are challenged because you can identify something, but if you can't enforce the fix, right, it sometimes it can lack teeth. So
right.
How do you capture it is the first question, and then how do you enforce remediative activities?
So I mean, those are great questions for sure, and I wish I had a really great answer for that, and the answer is we don't capture. I think I mentioned that the SIG-Lite is a self-assessment, and with the volume of the people of the suppliers that we have, we can't do that. So what happens at Ford? I'm not saying that we just say, hey, whatever the supplier does, but from a service level. So if a supplier has provides Ford with an IT service, the business owner has a separate assessment or separate, well, I guess it is an assessment that needs to be done from that service level. And in that's where they capture evidence that these things are done. It's up to the business owner at that point for that particular service. From our standpoint, we just don't have the resources to do this, and at this point, we don't have the mandate to do that also. Was there a second part to that question also?
No, you answered both. Yeah. We got
a
follow-up on the to add to my procurement. Often procurement teams assign tiering based on cost. However, even suppliers who cost a little can have major cyber issues or major impacts. I completely agree with that. But Jeff, wouldn't that be something like you would have to just put forth a criteria that's somewhat binary? If you create anything relating to the F-150, you're a tier 1, full stop. Like
Hmm.
because if we can't build the
Yeah.
F-150, and I believe there was a German manufacturer over COVID that couldn't get a part and had to shut down. So,
Right. Right.
I mean, that feels like what it
Yeah.
would be, but I'm not the expert.
Well, there's certain criteria that we use to evaluate the priority. Cost is one of them, but that's not certainly not the only one, and certainly not the major one. Um, but we do have, we have, we get from purchasing a list of the F-150 suppliers. Those get to the top of the line. We have, I mean, any other like sequencing suppliers that require the inventory there to make that part. Those get prioritized. Um, how much we spend with them, that's one of them. I'd say that's probably down the line though.
Yeah, it's cost isn't the
Yeah.
thing; it's impact to the business, right?
Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
Um, so how do you deal with the business owner who wishes to accept the risk rather than drive the supplier to remediate? I don't know if you have any say over that, but
No, we don't. Like I mentioned, we're feeding information to the supplier risk management team. They have their risk acceptance policies and processes, um, and we don't really have a part of that. But that does happen for sure. I mean, business
yeah.
priorities a lot of times are paramount.
Interesting. We're seeing this more, and I'm starting to see. I'm just out there talking to customers and folks.
Mhm.
There do seem to be the fabrication of more kind of purchasing centers where you're seeing somebody from procurement, somebody from legal, somebody from risk, somebody from security.
Mhm.
As they onboard vendors, they're starting to think about this more cohesively as opposed to, you know, I ran it Dun and Bradstreet. We ran at site, right? Oh, you got
Mhm.
this, done, right?
Yeah.
Versus, do we need business level risks? Do we need a whole bunch of other things that, right, could
Mhm.
impact this? So I'm turning this into a little bit of a larger question from Joel, but does the legal department have a role in your third party risk management? And that can be yes or no and explain it, but who else gets a seat at the table, right? Or even as the program has been fabricated, continues to evolve, what would your ideal configuration be for that matter?
So, I mean, we do have some governance boards that we report up through some of our management, and the people that you say are really at the table. There's our OGC. Certainly, there's contracts with these teams, and we need to make sure that we're not overstepping what their obligations are. Um, and there's purchasing, supplier risk management. There's just general purchasing our operations team, our IT team that supports purchasing, our CISO, and and really those are the people that are involved, teams that are involved in the decision making on what we do going forward.
Got it. Somebody asked, so one of the things that we see here when we do, I know you're all in our database, right? And we send you out a lot of emails. The compliance stuff drives a disproportionate level of interest, NIST, ISO,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that type of stuff. So how have the regulators received your approach and process? Like, is there anywhere that you think maybe if you had it over you could do? Has it been a pretty smooth transition? Just curious.
Um, so I know that if we were to do over again, I think I would probably have a better communication plan both internally and externally
Why?
within. Because I mean there are times where we're relying a lot of times on our purchasing management, right? So it's kind of the trickle down for this is what's going to happen. Um, we're sending out these assessments, and a lot of times it doesn't trickle down. So you'll get a supplier, rightly so, coming back and going to their buyer and saying, "Hey, we got this. Looks like phishing. It comes from a Ford." Because we have an email relay where it comes from Ford.com, but boy, this looks like phishing. I've done my training, and I need to make sure that this is right, which is appropriate. But then our buyers in cases don't know, right? They don't know we're doing this, and it's a global company, and there's different, so I would probably have done the communication plan better. Well, both internally and well, mostly internally from what we're trying to do. So
I
is that the
appreciate
gist of your question?
Yeah, it did. And, we always ask one of my favorite questions, if you're a king for a day, or if you could go back in time and, give yourself that advice. I did just
Yeah.
watch The Flash today. So,
Mm-hmm.
so
Besides giving myself a promotion with that.
yeah, there you go.
Okay.
There you go. Or maybe not have Barry Sanders retire too early, but that's a different conversation for a different
That's
day.
a different conversation.
You guys are going to be good this year, but that's beside the point. Hey, Melissa, we've been firing questions at Jeff for a pretty extended period of time. I know we had more, but I wanted to give Scott an opportunity. I know we have Scott an opportunity to just fill everybody in on prevalent for just 2 minutes, ask the last poll question, and let everybody maybe get a drink refresh before we get to the bottom of the hour. So would it be okay to pause here for a minute and take the next steps? I just, look, Jeff, maybe we'll just do a QA. I know this took a while and we got a lot, but we have never had so many active questions throughout. So there's clearly a demand to hear what you had to say. So maybe we just have a QA with you or sometime. And careful, we had 100 and something people on, so your email might be getting blown up soon. But
okay. Not surprising.
Yeah.
And not unusual. So no worries.
Awesome. Yeah, great. Thanks, Mike. And thanks, Jeff. I'm just going to take, just a couple of minutes to talk about, prevalence approach to addressing the third-party risk management challenge. And then once I've kind of walked through a little bit of our approach, then we'll pass it back over to Jeff. And I imagine there'll be some more questions to answer. So Melissa, if you could move to the next slide, please. Ultimately, what we're trying to help organizations accomplish is to answer three primary questions or issues, or to address three primary goals. And the first of those is to get the data you need to make better insights. Maybe you've got it in silos. Maybe different departments are managing the vendor relationship. Maybe your procurement team owns the relationship, but it's IT security or risk management that executes the actual assessments, right? Bringing that information together into one place that helps you make good, informed decisions on, risk scoring, risk posture, remediation, and next steps with vendors. Item number one. Item number two kind of relates to number one, is increasing team efficiency and breaking down silos. You've got, as I mentioned, procurement might own a vendor relationship. Excuse me. IT might execute on the assessment. Finance might be involved. You've got the external auditors to deal with, and everybody has a little piece of the puzzle that they're playing with here. So pulling everything together into a single platform that enables you to action risks, execute on reporting efficiently, is one of the ultimate goals here. And then third, and the big one, frankly, is evolving and scaling your program over time. Whether you're adding suppliers, making an acquisition, did a divestiture, reducing suppliers, going through a rationalization process, whatever, you have to be able to have a nimble and agile program that kind of flexes with business requirements, and that's what a TPRM platform like Prevalent can really help you accomplish. Next slide, please. So our approach is to, and you can build it out a little bit more, Melissa, until you see the little blue bars at the bottom. There you go. What we really talk about is, and what we see in the market is, that there are distinct risks at every stage of your third-party vendor and supplier relationship. You see risk during sourcing and selection. These guys have a kind of a squirrely SOC 2 report, or some spotty financial issues, maybe poor credit rating, or maybe they've got some sanctions or reputational problems you have to address. That's a very different type of risk to look at and manage, and frankly, sometimes a different department to take a look at that risk than at the top of that graphic right there in the assess and remediate function, where you're doing a much deeper dive on particular due diligence topics, security policies, ESG program, data privacy and protection policies, financial compliance, and more. every one of these stages around this life cycle presents its own unique challenges, mostly related to a lack of insight, not having stuff, kind of pulled together, having a very manual approach. And then the solutions are also unique to every one of these wedges in this life cycle as well, from being much more prescriptive about getting intelligence into your RFX processes, to onboarding and contracting and building in the right to audit clauses, automating your assessment processes, enabling continuous monitoring of data so that you've got feeds of information coming into your environment continuously in between your regular assessments or your triggered assessments, monitoring the SLAs and the KPIs and the KRIs for each of those vendors, make sure things are followed up on appropriately. And then eventually, as all relationships do, and they come to an end, what are the specific tasks and processes that have to be addressed before you, terminate a particular contract. Like at the end of the day, we're trying to accomplish for you, a simplified and sped up process for onboarding vendors, getting you to a single source of the truth, closing gaps in processes, and then unifying everybody in the organization around the third-party lifecycle. Next slide, please, Melissa. We address a whole host of risks in the prevalent platform. Here are 6 categories of them, and this is just a sample of what I could squeeze in the tiniest type I could find on a slide. But it just gives you an idea of how elastic the platform can be in managing risk, whether you're issuing a dedicated assessment for one of these categories or you're consuming monitoring feeds to make decisions. Next slide, please, Melissa. What we actually deliver as far as solution is really a 3-part harmony. First is the expertise that we deliver through our Risk Operations Center, which Jeff mentioned, earlier on in the presentation. This is our managed services organization that does a lot of the hard work for you, from onboarding, assessment and scheduling, collection and management, analyzing responses and evidence and documentation, and then helping you define the right remediations to go back out to your vendors with. A whole host of data sources that we pre-integrated already on your behalf, so you don't have to try and tie a bunch of data feeds together into the platform. We pump it all in there for you, right into the same risk register that your assessment responses appear in, with some correlation between the disparate findings, so you can then take action on potential gaps or problems when you're validating assessment controls with outside monitoring data. And then finally, we house it all in one platform that enables you to get great workflow, reporting, and then risk management guidance to share with the rest of the organization. Next slide, please, Melissa. Really, at the end of the day, our objective is to help you make good, well-informed decisions, be smarter by giving you comprehensive risk and performance insights, great analytics, and role-based reporting for your internal and external stakeholders, to unify your teams under a single source of the truth, to look at the life cycle on a unified basis from onboarding to offboarding, and then give you prescriptive guidance and intelligence to help you to understand what to do with the risks you find and how to dispose of them and triage them from there. So honestly, that's our approach to third-party risk management: to take a look at the life cycle, address those risks at every life cycle, and then give you the process, the intelligence, and the guidance to help you improve that program over time. And I think that's pretty well representative of some of the capabilities we've been able to deliver forward. And I'll kind of pitch back over to you, Melissa, if you want to open up for questions, or Mike.
Before we hop into those questions, and I see we have a few of them piling up, so I'm going to launch our second poll question. Keep the questions coming, you guys. And, we're curious, are you looking to augment or establish a TPRM program? Like I said, be honest. We do follow up with you. Like, it's physically me. I'm a real person. I'll follow up with you. And I want to make sure that we don't let anybody slip through the cracks. So just answer that best you can, get that out of your way. And then I think we might have time for maybe 2 more questions. So Mike, if you want to comb through a few of those, or Jeff, whichever you think are going to be the most valuable, I will pitch it over to you guys.
Yeah, let me take a look here. Just this is a good one from Catherine. When performing your annual annual reviews, how do you ensure that SLAs are being met? If they're not, what steps do you take to ensure that the supplier is getting back on track?
Well, again, what happens is that we provide a lot of emails that come to reminder emails, and even we're going to be look to purchasing to send a couple of emails after the assessment period window has ended. A lot of times we'll get a request to extend that. We certainly would do that. I mentioned a red, yellow, green status. There's another status that purchasing uses that is orange status. And orange status means that they were not compliant in completing the assessment. They didn't complete in time. Maybe didn't even start. And we had and this is the first example I've actually heard of this happening, was that a supplier was working with the buyer on a purchase, and the buyer saw that there was an orange on the dashboard next to the supplier name to say they didn't complete the assessment, and they stopped the purchase, and that becomes a motivated supplier at that point. So we leverage that as much as anything.
All right, this will be the last question again. Just want to give everybody, and then Melissa will turn it back to you. But I like this one. Has you ever it's a long one, but have you ever not assessed somebody because they're someone like Microsoft? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, they pretty much ignore us. I mean, the big ones, Cisco, Microsoft, Amazon, Oracle. They don't ignore us for sure. I mean, generally what happens is each of those from our management team, or the IT management team, up through our CIO, a lot of the management has kind of the relationship manager with some of the big guys like Microsoft and all the others, and we work with them to ensure that we've got the right they've got everything in place that they need, and generally they do that through other managers, so other methods, and so they don't fill out a SIG-Lite, quite honestly.
I bet they don't.
Yeah.
I bet they don't. Hey, let me put video back on. My internet's been wonky, but Jeff, this was just awesome. Thank you. The amount and the quantity and quality of questions, I think, represents the desire to hear from someone like you in an established program, and you did a great job, and I just appreciated the personal touch up front. So that was awesome. So thank you from everybody at Prevalent. It was great.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. And it's, I think the deck is going to be sent out. Is that correct?
Yes, that is.
All right. And I believe I have my email address in there, so I'll be looking forward to emails.
There you go. Melissa, anything else?
I really do value this interaction. I think it's very useful compared to, all the Q&As that we tend to get. This is quite a bit. So hopefully you all found it valuable. Maybe we'll even be lucky enough to have him on, in the future. So stay tuned, everybody. Thanks, Mike, for hopping on. I know you've got a lot to do today, and Scott as well. And then one last time, thank you, Jeff. And we'll see you all at a future webinar and in your inboxes. So take care, guys. Have a good day.
All right.
Thanks all.